Good morning, good morning, and welcome to Jamaica at Sunrise and Blitz Radio. I'm your host, Fabian Lewis, and we'll be dealing with the issues that have arisen from last night or since morning. And this morning I'll start by reviewing some of the stories in the newspapers. A very interesting one that the Gleaner has is entitled Pay the Man, Huey. Privy Council orders pensions payment for retired lecturer. And this story is very, very interesting, very important. Now that we are having this argument about the purpose of the London-based Privy Council and whether or not we should retain it as our final appellate court. And it is very interesting to see that again the Privy Council has stepped in to right a wrong. And it is quite fascinating that the appeals court in Jamaica, that some is touting to replace the Privy Council, the appeals court actually overturned the decision that a magistrate made that the University of the West Indies should pay Dr. Anthony Boffo-Bastick, or Buffo, I hope I pronounce his name, Boffo-Bastick, a psychologist, right? The local courts, the magistrates court, first of all, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Mr. Bastick, and the Supreme Court judge at that time was K. Beckford. That's in 2013. The UWI then appealed the decision, and the Court of Appeal, the President of the Court of Appeal, Justice Seymour Panton, right? In that ruling was the dissenting voice that says the former lecturer was entitled to the benefit, while the rest of the judges sitting on the bench in 2013, right, ruled that he shouldn't get a dime. Now the president of the Court of Appeal saw differently, and he was right, because when it went now to the court in England, the Privy Council in England, they ruled that the University of the West Indies should pay the man, and not only pay him his pension, but to pay his legal costs arising from the proceedings. No. In the last paragraph in the Gleaner's story, it said, in a scathing judgment, the court said, take a student at the university who arrives on campus on September 1 and left on the first day of the long vacation, which appears to be June 11. Would he not contend, and would the reasonable onlooker not agree, that the student had completed a year of his studies or take a prisoner sentenced to 10 years. A variety of rules mean that the sentence need not mean and often does not mean that the prisoner must serve a full 10 years. These two preliminary examples indicate only that in particular contexts there can be some flexibility in the concept of a year. So the focus must turn to the particular context of Dr. Bufoy Bostic's appointment. Now, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if this is the reason why so much of these people that goes to the university, works at the university, it makes you wonder if it is that's the reason why they are pushing for this Caribbean Court of Justice so much. Right? Because, and this is a widespread feeling, that when it comes on to Caribbean justice, when it comes on to Caribbean ways of doing things, these judges can be, and some people may dare say, actually are influenced by the consideration of certain people and certain positions in society and all of that. Now, the case of the CCJ right now is by all means a very important case. Now, what we are seeing is that you have a certain set of persons pushing for the CCJ to become Jamaica's final appellate court. However, the only argument that is being really advanced on the CCJ matter is that it will somehow finish our process of independence. It will enshrine our sovereignty and all sort of nonsense. You hardly hear anybody looking at the issue of justice, and not only justice in the sense of availability, but justice in the sense of quality. While widespread availability of justice is critical for the functioning of society, we must also understand that the quality of the justice being delivered in many respects is far more important than the actual widespread availability. Because you can have widespread availability, but at the same time the quality of the ruling issued by these judges are so poor that it negates the very thing that it was set up in the first place to actually bring swift justice to people. Again, we know that these judges that will actually occupy the bench on the CCJ can, and I will not say will, but I'll say can be influenced by circumstances that is not entirely borne out by law. Right? They can be influenced in many cases by circumstances that the judges in England cannot and will not be influenced by. And that is a very important point. Because apart from the president of the Court of Appeal, these people were willing to deprive these psychologists of 10 hard years of labor to the University of the West Indies. And these are the very same set of people that may very well have to rule upon some very important matters that concerns the common man and some well-established persons or some well-established institution. These people were willing to see a man work for 10 consecutive years, right? At the University of the West Indies. They were willing to allow the University of the West Indies not to pay that man one dime, even though the Supreme Court found that, look here, the University of the West Indies is liable. Now you have the highest court in the land with some persons deciding to deprive a man. Well, the highest court based in Jamaica, I should say, right? Depriving the man of his hard-earned pension. Now it took the Privy Council, the final appellate body, to say, look here, you cannot do this. And this thing ties in, right? This sort of wronged injustice ties into another story some years ago of a man that I think picked about half a dozen Aki from King's House Land and was sentenced to 3 months or more. And a man that stole over how much, $1 million, and he was given probation or something like that. Right? When you see issues like this arise, you cannot help but shudder at the possibility of Jamaica moving away from the Privy Council and going to the CCJ. Right? If it is that our courts that has been established for quite a long time now can make such an egregious mistake, let's put it that way, with only one person sitting on that bench that realized that what is going on is wrong, but his vote wasn't enough to overturn the decision. No, I shudder to think of what might happen at the CCJ. A young court, hasn't been tried and proven to any extent, and the Shanika Mary case that a lot of persons talk about. From the minute Shanika Mary took that case to the CCJ, I knew she would have won. It is very simple. If she didn't win, there could be no possibility of Jamaica ever going the way of the CCJ. It would never happen. Never happen. Because Jamaicans again would look at it and say, look here, CARICOM doesn't work. We are the main market for CARICOM and we don't export much to them. And even with the little that we export, we have hell getting it into their markets. Right? CARICOM doesn't work. And now we are seeing that the CCJ actually doesn't work. You understand? So those judges, I can guarantee, couldn't afford to see the Shanika Mary case go any other way, regardless of the circumstances or the law. Regardless of that, it is as simple and plain as that, as far as I am concerned. We must also that this matter is of fundamental importance, because if we cannot have any confidence in decisions rendered by our courts, by our judges, then where will that confidence come from to move from the established court in London to a primarily a new court? Who is going to have any confidence in that? And let's be very careful. I'm not saying that judges are influenced by politics and whatsoever. I don't have any evidence about that. But the fact of the matter is that Caribbean people in general do not trust the justice system right across the Caribbean. But it is even worse in Jamaica. We do not trust judges. It is a widespread feeling that our judges are influenced by outside factors other than the law. Because you cannot fathom some of the judgments rendered. You can't, even this one that the Glen have. How could you try to deprive a man of 10 years of his service and trying to interpret 1 year to be so strict and there is no variations or anything, when we know that that is not how the thing works? And when these judgments are rendered and then overturned by the Privy Council, it does not, and when you look at it, you are depriving a person of his or her own money that they work so hard for, that he or she works so hard for, right? When the common man looks at that and say, look here, if they can do a high society man like that, what will they do to me? And this is very, very serious. These judgments rendered by our courts and then overturned by the Privy Council will only undermine the little faith that we actually have in our justice system. These decisions need to be thought out properly. It doesn't make any sense. And you have to wonder, for an institution that claims to be so progressive as the University of the West Indies, you have to sit down and wonder, why would they want to deprive a teacher of all his pension? You would like to think, or one would like to believe, that the University of the West Indies is such a progressive institution that it loves equal rights and justice. And there is no justice in trying to deprive a man of his pension. And a technicality that he was just 36 days short of 10 years. That is just grossly wicked. You have a man working for you for so long, and let's look at it this way. Let's say that that gentleman, Mr. Bastig, let's say that he is indeed 36 days short of the requirement for his pension. Good God Almighty, man. For a person to work so long for an institution, and you are going to look at that person and say, look here, you are 36 days short, so you are not going to get any pension. That is just wicked, man. That is just wicked. And it makes you wonder, how many of these very same things have been done to persons who do not have the money to even make it into one of our courts? it makes you wonder how much of this sort of injustice has affected persons that cannot find the means to hire fancy lawyers to plead their case. And how much of these judges that sits in Jamaica put up with these sort of rampant injustice. You have to wonder how in God's name this country can ever be governed by the rule of law when you have such grave injustice being handed out by people. And the fascinating thing about it, we hear people talking about the CCJ and how it will remove the last vestiges of colonialism and all sorts of rubbish. But look at it now. It took the same old wicked set of white people, the same old wicked colonialists, to actually render a just judgment. So the fact of the matter is, if you should interpret this thing strictly on the basis of how many Jamaicans will interpret this judgment, is that our black judges or our black people, or however you want to put it, cannot or refuse to render justice for our people, and it is taking the same old wicked white people them to actually give what is due unto us. So why in God's name will we actually want to part with a system that interprets the law plain and simple? Right? Why would you want to part with a system that it is the only bulwark against unjust judgments rendered by our courts? Because I still can't understand, how is it that our court of appeal judges interpreted, I figure, the law or other statutes in the way that it did, with the exception of the president, Mr. Seymour Panton, right? He seems to be the only person that sat on that bench who saw through the injustice that would be meted out. He dissented, and when the ruling was rendered by the Privy Council, they actually mentioned him. Right? They actually mentioned him, and in which they said that he's the only person that dissented. You understand? And it makes you want to puke many times at certain stuff that happen in this country. But the important point still is that these cases are only highlighted when the decisions are overturned by the Privy Council and it is somebody that has money. You understand? But even more so, it is when the courts in England overturn these judgments before we actually hear much about them. And it cannot be that we already do not have much confidence in our justice system, as I said before. And these judgments are not going to help the cause. People do not have any faith in Jamaican justice, and we will not have any faith in Caribbean justice, as it is practiced. But people have more faith in the judges sitting in London, interpreting the law and dispensing the ruling. That is what we need. We need an institution that each and every Jamaican can believe in. Because whether Jamaicans think about the Privy Council as being the vestige of colonialism and all sort of stuff, Jamaicans have confidence in these judges. Because if you speak to the common man on the road, they will tell you, these judges cannot be bribed, these judges cannot be influenced, these judges goes with the law. That is how Jamaicans view this thing. So when you see judgments like these, you start to understand why is it that these people do not want Jamaica to retain the Privy Council. You start to understand why is it that the government is so afraid to go to the Jamaican people in a referendum for us to decide, because they know they will lose. You begin to understand why these powerful persons in society goes after the opposition leader when he declared that he was a nationalist. You understand? And he was not running down any fleeting dream of Caribbean unity or something to that extent. You understand? You begin to understand why they are so angry. Because I am almost certain that if this wasn't the Privy Council, this judgment would have been different. Or at least that's the perception. Because we have seen cases where people get some heavy sentences for like Aki, but others that does a lot more harm to this country gets away scot-free. And this is not how you run a civilized society. This is not how you run a country based upon law and order. We need to start understanding that it is not just about the availability of justice, but more importantly, the quality of justice. Because I would prefer travel to England tomorrow morning to settle a case, whereby I know, I am confident, I am persuaded that I will get a fair judgment one way or the other, than sit in this country, get a free ride to the CCJ or any other court of the land. If you are giving me $1 million, if you're giving me a limousine, and if you're giving me food and clothes and all sorts of something, I would prefer pay my way going to England to get a judgment. Because that is where I am confident that I will get justice. And it is a very sad fact. It is a very, very sad fact. But it's a fact nonetheless. People like myself are always skeptical of anything that has to do with the CCJ and the proponents of the CCJ, because they have other motives. As far as I'm concerned, they have other motives, but they use colonialism and all of these things as a smoke screen to hoodwink person. But look here, when people read judgments like these, they can actually see through all the crap that these people are trying to push on us. We need justice, because without justice there would be no peace. But it is of far greater importance to have confidence in the rulings that are handed down by our judges. One, we need justice. We need justice to be available. But even of greater importance is that when the courts are rendering judgments, these judgments are quality judgments. You understand? Quality judgment that can stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever. We need justice, but we need quality judgments, and ruling like these does not engender confidence in our court system, neither the CCJ. That's it for Jamaica at Sunrise this morning. Join me at another time when we'll discuss another burning issue that affects us all.